is his pillow, open heart surgery. So know how that goes. The Fullers, need to keep them in our prayers. Charles and Tina. Tim Ashley's brother is in the hospital. They have, yes, sir. Andrew was scheduled for surgery in the morning on his foot, and now he's fallen down a flight of stairs in addition to that. And speaking of falling, Holly had been here yesterday to the party and was doing real good. And in the middle of the night, when she got up to go to the restroom, she took a header into the wall and got a big old knot on her head. So it seems like every time we take one step forward, we at least take a half step back with these folks. So keep all those in your thoughts and prayers. Anyone else that we need to add to that list? Yes. Angel's friend. Okay. And Barbara Little's sister that had been in the burn unit at Birmingham is now in a nursing home. And they'd moved her there once before and had to take her back because of her O2 levels had dropped, but she's back to the nursing home now. Okay. This morning, we're going to try something different also. We'd been talking, and as you know, we stream our services, everything. And in our classes, both Terry and I and just about everybody else that's up here, we like to have a participatory class. We like feedback from everybody. And when we're streaming things, it's been where there's been some dead air time because if one of you is talking, they can't hear it. So today we're going to turn on a set of mics overhead and try it. If that don't work, so it improves that, we'll try something different so that we can improve our services. And in we were streaming without the mics being on overhead, it sounded like a solo up here being sung, which is not truly representative of what we do. So he's going to start turning them, after the songs are announced, he's going to start turning off the main mic and then just using the overhead mic so we can try to get a sense of what we're really doing. Any other questions, comments, anything we need to do before we begin our class? Okay, Brother Henderson, would you lead us in a prayer, please?
Truly appreciative of the beautiful weather you have provided for us, changes of the season, everything that is good for us you provide, we're grateful. Father, we pray for those who are sick or injured, and we wish that if it is your will, you would provide help and turn these to their strength and well-being. Father, we go forward in this classroom and pray that we can learn many things that you have provided for our betterment. Father, you are the true, the living God. We love you, thank you, and pray this prayer to you in the name of our Lord, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Acts chapter 10. Acts chapter 10. If I were to say that when we get to Acts chapter 10, that we're studying a man by the name of Cornelius today, and if I were to say he is going to be the first Gentile convert, what would you say? Would you agree? Would you disagree? No opinions, huh? You agree? Okay. Sometimes people want to, when we're talking about this issue of moving into the Gentile world for conversions, as you know from our previous studies, that it all started in Jerusalem and then it started spreading out. And some want to put the Ethiopian eunuch as the first because he was from Ethiopia. But if you really look at it, he was either a Jew that lived in Ethiopia or he was a proselyte based on other things we know. And he had been to Jerusalem to worship. So we can't really focus on him, I don't think, as being first. So the importance here is we're going to go through this just a little bit more and build on that. But with Cornelius, verse 1 says there was a certain man in Caesarea. Now there's two Caesareas. Which one is this? I'm sorry? On the coast. It's not Caesarea Philippi. It's on the coast. And he was a centurion of the band called the Italian band. Now, depending on which commentary you look at or which history research you do, when you get into Roman history, there's a lot of gaps, especially when you start talking about their military. We do know that they had legions, divisions, and some were stationed in one part of the world, some in another. In the Roman armies also, as they went into countries, they would recruit people from that country so there could be a mixed group of people in each cohort or each legion. And here, by calling it the Italian band, we really don't know if that was a specific name of a legion like the 5th, 4th, but we can surmise that it means that everyone in that division was Italian, because where's Rome? In Italy. So that's the best that we can surmise on that. But anyway, it's been called specifically by name, Cornelius, a centurion. And we've gone over this before, but as a reminder, what is a centurion?
Commander of 100 men.
Commander of 100. And today that would probably be the equivalent of a captain. Okay. Now, in verse 2, it starts out with he was a devout man, one that feared God with all his house, gave much alms to the people, prayed to God always. He was devout, gave much alms, so apparently he was a very good man. Now, question, and this is sort of a supposition type question, but when it said he prayed, what did he pray for? You see, I think that the Bible answers that question. If we go into the next verse, it says he saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. What would he be praying that would cause an angel from God to come to him and speak to him? Keep reading. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God. Odds are that since he was saying, What is it, Lord? Some people want to say that word just means sir, that he didn't really know it was an angel from God, but I sort of take another view on that because he was in prayer and now this angel comes and speaks to him. But I believe that if you read through this and put it all in context, that what Cornelius is praying for is guidance. What do I need to do? What's the right thing to do? Because this angel comes and then tells him in verse 5, send men to Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. And then as we go on down, he's going to come and tell you what you need to do. So at least in my way of looking at this section of verses here, since he is a devout man, he's not a Jew, he's a Gentile, but he is devout, he's believing, and he's praying. He must be praying for everything that we today need to pray for. What is the first thing when we pray that we need to pray for? Wisdom and understanding. He that lacketh wisdom, ask. Brother Jim?
I'm gonna make a supposition too here, just to throw it in. If he was around where Jesus was being preached and taught, and it was being taught obviously in synagogues first to the Jews, and he wasn't a Jew, but he was devout toward God. Some of my thinking is, where do I fit in?
Mm-hmm.
What am I to do? If there's this way that they're talking about, this new way, that Jesus provided, how, what do I need to do? That kind of thing. Because a devout man of God will always want to know more, and will want to seek more knowledge. And that's sort of there, because he had to be, obviously know all that was going on. Jesus was being taught,
He was honestly trying to do the right thing. And as we get into verse 6, it says his whole household, he calls for 2 of his servants. And he calls for one of his soldiers to make this trip. And one of his soldiers is even recorded in verse 6 as being a devout soldier. To me, what that indicates is that Cornelius not only believed, but he lived that way because his whole household was involved in it. And where did this devout soldier come from? He could have been just on his own, but he and Cornelius had something going because Cornelius called him. Was it Cornelius's influence on his 100 that brought this man to this point? You can do a lot of supposition there, but for those of us that have been in the military, in some leadership positions, normally the unit will go like the leadership. It will either be good or bad. When I got to Korea, I was told that I could not stop smoking in the office, and I could not stop profanity. 2 days later, when I made the announcement, guess what? No profanity, no smoking in the building. Now, if I'd have sat back and said, well, you're right, can't do it. And there's others, John Sumlin, he's made the same comment about his organization. Through his, he didn't use this phrase, I'll use it since he's not here, but through his influence, he stopped profanity in his outfit. So the leaders have a great deal to do, and everybody can be an influence. It didn't have to come from the top. It could come from anywhere in the organization for someone to be an inspiration that way. Brother Clance, I think you had your hand going up.
Whether we look at the Ethiopian unit or now this man, both of them are speaking on all these good qualities maybe said about them, showing that this is doing some good things or outward appearance isn't the thing that's going to matter because either is going to come and tell us to be saved. So, as much as we may highlight being devout, giving alms, prayer, whatever, this man's still lost.
He's not there yet. He's still lost, no matter what he's done, correct? Anything else? Okay. As we get to verse 6, then it says, we'll start with verse 5. And now send men to Joppa for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. I'm going to pause here and talk about some geography, and then we'll get to validating some of the information later. But how far from Joppa is Caesarea? Or Caesarea and Joppa are approximately how far apart? Both of them are on the coastline.
40, 50 miles.
Roughly 40 miles, give or take, okay? Now, the reason I point that out is when we get on down in here, Cornelius, when he called his servants together and the devout soldier together and sent them on their way, they showed up in Joppa about noontime the next day. Now, how could, since they didn't have an airplane, a helicopter, a car, motorized vehicle, how are they going to manage to go 40 miles from the ninth hour of the day that he is praying, which is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, until noon the next day?
Forced march.
Basically a forced march, meaning that that's no military term. You can be out marching and you go at one pace. You can double time at another pace, but then a forced march is in between your normal pace and your double time. So it's just a hurried pace, a hurried walking pace to get where you're going. And you only stop and rest when you absolutely need to, which is not very often. So apparently what happened here is as soon as Cornelius heard from the angel what he was supposed to do, he didn't hesitate. He didn't have to sit down and think about it. He acted immediately, sent them out, and they marched. They went there overnight and got there at about noon the next day. Because later when we get through to it, after he's talking to Peter, he says that 4 days ago, when he was in prayer, all this happened. So within a 4-day period of time, he had sent men to Joppa to round up Peter, and they had made the trip back. So that means that Peter didn't hesitate either. So, like I say, we'll see that as we go on along here. But verse 8 then picks up with, 7 says, and when the angel which spoken to Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants, devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. Like I said, that means he took action immediately. And Joppa, roughly 40 miles away, as we talked. It says, on the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh to the city, Peter went up onto the housetop to pray about the 6th hour, which is about noon. Now, the verse here that says, when he declared these things, he sent them, verse 9 starts out, on the morrow. Now, to us today, that would indicate that they started the next day, because when do we start our time? The next day. We start our day at midnight, but when did the Jews and when did the people back in those days start their time?
Sundown.
About sundown. So as it gets sundown, they're on their next day, they're heading out. Verses 10 through 16 deal with it's all it makes one thought. He became, we're talking about Peter being on the housetop about the 6th hour, about noon. He became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. Saw heaven open and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the 4 corners, let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have neither eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the 2nd time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. So this happened 3 times, thrice. Now, as we read this, it seems like it's very cut and dry. Peter's in a vision. Sheep comes down, there's all manner of things. God tells him nothing's unclean. But to Peter, if you put yourself in Peter's mindset, he was a Jew. All his life, he had been taught what? There were clean and there were unclean. Also, all of his life, when it comes into people, what had he been taught? There's the Jew and there's the rest of the world. So, in Peter's mind, and even God, back in the Old Testament, when we get back to when he was setting all of this up, it was by his instructions that there were clean and unclean, things they could eat and couldn't eat. Now, when we're getting into the New Testament and we're getting into the New Covenant, that wall of partition is now done away with. So here is where the transition is taking place with Peter. And it's taking God to enforce that, or at least advise him of this. Because later on, when he gets to Peter, he makes the statement, to Cornelius, he makes the statement that God showed me these things. So here, Peter in his mind said, I can't cook and eat certain things. But now God told him that whatever I have created, whatever I've done, it's all good. Questions, Brother Joel?
And even within the Jewish nation, they had some people that they saw as being unclean as well.
Correct.
And he would have grown up in that tradition, and the chief priests and scribes were preaching, to despise others and so forth. So all of these things would have been marinated in his head, and as well as the law as well. So when he saw all of these different foods to eat, and he saw some as being some common and some unclean and so forth, all of that just brought back that tradition, that false tradition that, some people have to be outcast and despised. But God knows the heart. God knows the true person, and they saved him.
Yeah, Peter is not a blank slate. We made a comment, I was talking to somebody out in the lobby earlier about something totally different, but it's talking about training dogs. I said it's, even an old dog can be taught new tricks, but if you're changing an old dog's habit, it's hard to unlearn and then learn. The same way with people, it's hard to unteach somebody something and then to teach them. Brother Flint.
But Jesus is teaching parables. There's a spiritual message behind it. Here there is one of them. Here there's nothing to be refused. You want to eat as you need. But he's having to move from the Jews that taught the gospel now to the Gentiles, which they would think we don't have any dealing with them, we don't want anything to do with it. He's having to learn the message about evangelism, that it's for everybody.
Correct. And when we get a little farther on, why did people go with him from Joppa? Why did some of the elders of the city go with him? And we'll get into that discussion a little bit later too. But yes, sir.
Jesus is fighting this tradition problem from the get-go. You see it all through the Gospels, and we'll continue to see it through the New Testament. And I think we should take a warning from that we need to be careful we don't act what we think that we've been taught all the time, what we teach, unless we know it's what the gospel teaches.
Correct. As he said, Christ had been battling this all along. You can recall the Samaritan woman at the well. What did his traveling buddies say about that? And we can go back to when he's eating with the Pharisees and tax collectors and sinners, what was being said about him then. So it's been an ongoing battle here. Verse 17 says, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, was lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise, therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent thee. So Peter is having some thoughts about what's going on here. And then the angel even tells him, don't doubt anything. I'm the one that's responsible for this. But I find this part interesting too. When Peter went down, the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius said, behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause wherefore you are come? See, the angel hadn't told him everything that was going on. The angel had just in the visions pointed out, And God, through the visions, had pointed out that there's nothing unclean. It's all one now. And then the angel told him to doubt nothing, that the men that are down there have been sent to you. I also find it interesting, does anybody in here have any version of the Bible that is not King James? All right. You have an ESV.
ESV.
Okay, still, read verse 21.
And Peter went down to the men and said, Behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore ye are come?
Now, for those that have the King James, did he leave anything out? He left out the part which said, which were sent unto him from Cornelius. See, the King James says, Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius and said, Behold, I am he whom you seek. That little phrase is left out of almost every Bible other than the King James. Now, we could get into a whole discussion on Bibles and Bible, what's right and wrong, but I sometimes prefer to use other translations other than King James when it comes down to specific words. For instance, if we go over to verse 29 in this same chapter, it says, Therefore came I unto you with gainsay. What does gainsay? If you look at the ESV, what does it say?
It says gainsay.
It says that too, but the ESV, I think, that says objection. Objection is really a truer word for this. So when you're studying your Bible, you got to sort of blend them together to get down to the root of the matter and see what's going on. But anyway, I think the King James here just fully explains what's going on, that these men have been sent. Peter's told to go down and talk to them, that they have been sent, and you're not to doubt anything. And then verse 21 just puts it all into context, saying that Peter went down to the men which were sent by Cornelius, asked them what they needed. Verse 22 then says, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, one that feared God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from God by an holy angel to send for thee in his house and to hear words of thee. Now, they don't just tell him that, hey, Cornelius, that centurion over there, about 40 miles away, wants to talk to you. What did they do? They heaped praise on him. They told Peter that he was a good man, told Peter that he was well respected among all the Jews. So that sort of give Peter an idea that something good was going to happen out of this, right? Or at least not to worry about it. Then, and this next verse is absolutely fascinating if you step back and look at it. It says, Then called he them in and lodged them, and on the morrow Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. Whoa. What did we just said about Peter's attitude about clean and unclean before the blanket came down? What's he going to tell Cornelius later? That Jews and Gentiles don't have anything to do with each other? But what did Peter do immediately? Invited him in, lodged him. That within itself was a marvelous event. By the way, when it says certain brethren, how many brethren made the trip with him?
6,
Where do we find that?
11.
Chapter 11 and verse 12, we find out that 6 men went with him. And as Brother Clancy brought up earlier, and I'll cover that now, why do you think that certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him? by brethren is talking about fellow Christians here. Why did anybody go with Peter? Peter was the one that was visited and the one that was asked to be heard from. Pardon? Witnesses. All right. I think that's what we're going to find out as we get further on along, because we've talked about this being the first Gentile conversion. So if you got 6 witnesses, that just makes it the stronger. And what those 6 are going to find out and admit to later is that, wow, there is no difference in this new thing going on. Verse 24 says, on the morrow they went. Cornelius waited for them and called together his kinsmen and near friends. We already know that he is a devout person and gives alms. He's got his whole household. He's even got devout people in that he's over. Now, with him sending for Peter, I look at it this way. God talked to him in a prayer and told him to do something. He didn't hesitate. He immediately sent people to Peter. Now he's not only waiting on Peter to come back, apparently he has zero doubt that Peter's going to come and visit him. Why would you get your kinsmen together and your friends together waiting on something to happen if you wasn't absolutely sure it was going to happen? So I think, again, that just builds on Cornelius's character about how devout he is, because when he asked for this, was told he was going to get it, he believed it, he acted on that belief, and he's still acting on that belief. Verse 25 says, as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him. Notice this. He didn't just greet Peter. What did he do? He fell down at his feet and worshiped him. A Roman captain of the 100, centurion, who had a lot of power, authority, and respect, when Peter walks in, he falls down to worship Peter. Anybody but me see that as a sort of an astonishing event?
I think that shows how devout, he was as far as him seeking the truth. That was very important to him. So much so that when he showed up, he fell down at his feet. Very humble in a sense. He can do that.
And when God had told him to send for Peter, hey, this is a representative of God.
See, it's not so odd if you look at the way he would have been raised. As a Gentile, a Roman in particular, he was ingrained to worship. As far as from his religious standpoint, before he came to the knowledge of God. But it's more than that. He's seen all of this stuff that's going on. Not only has he had God speak to him directly, one would make the supposition he's seen miracles performed in person or seen God's power in other ways, and he knows what's going to happen. It's not something that he's just waiting to see. He knows what's going on. He's not a slow man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have reacted the way he did earlier in the chapter and immediately said, okay, let's go. And he's an active faith in what's about to go on. There's no reason for him not to behave this way.
Okay.
And it's the same lesson again for us today. We know what's going on here today, now. Why wouldn't we act on it?
I guess I just phrased it poorly to start with. I thought about it after that. And with him being who he was and brought up as a Roman soldier, The only time a Roman soldier would bow before somebody else would be of someone with higher authority and power. And this is why he is paying homage to Peter. But Peter is, like he's gonna say, just a man, but still, here you've got this Roman soldier with so much power and authority immediately bowing to the man because God had told him to send for him. So he recognized Peter right away as being of higher authority for the intended purpose here. Does that make better sense? Any other questions or comments?
Well, that doesn't necessarily, even though it's the word worship, it's that he is showing respect to Peter. He recognizes him as being a man of authority. Therefore, he's going to have to submit as far as the words that Peter's going to speak.
Correct. Because that's why he sent for him, to find out what he was supposed to do. Verse 27 on, and he talked with him and went in and found many that were come together, and he said unto them, ye know how that it is unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come into one of another nation, but God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Again, if you look at it, could that have been insulting to Cornelius? Peter talking to him saying, you know how it's not lawful for the Jew to have contact with anybody else. But in context, God showed me that nothing is common or unclean. So prior to God showing Peter this, Peter had even considered a Roman centurion as common and unclean. And now his whole mindset has been changed. Yeah.
Well, I think the knowledge that he was well thought of among the Jews, that he knew he had a relationship with the Jews and what they believed. So, you know, that was probably easier to say to him than maybe someone who had no knowledge of the Jews and what they thought or what they believed. Because he already knew how the Jews felt about Gentiles. If he had a good relationship with them, he had already heard what they knew. So when he said that, someone like when they went and said, you got all these gods here, here's one of the unknown God, we're going to tell you about him. And they sort of already had that thought that there were gods out there, and they were going to have to be told, these are false, but this one here we're going to talk about.
Jerry?
Just as an interesting side note, that's not unfamiliar to Cornelius. The Romans felt that way about everybody else too.
That's correct.
So, you know, they both look at the world through the same very glasses. It's just different people.
Yeah. We can look at Paul on that account when they beat him, and then when he challenged him saying, you just beat a Roman citizen, and oops. So, yeah.
Brother Larry,
Yes, sir.
I think we need to remember too that, I mean, in terms of Jews and Gentiles, we would be considered, if that was still the system in place, we would still be, all of us would still be considered Gentiles, right?
Correct.
But if the apostles didn't put away their traditions, because in Mark 7, verse 15, it says, the traditions of men make the word of God of no effect. So if those apostles didn't put away the traditions that they came from, we wouldn't even be here being Christians today. We'd have been lost.
That is correct.
And I think it's important for the church to remember in this day and age too that, nothing is common and unclean, because we can't let traditions creep into the church that, separate a group of people or one person or how many of people, because in that case, we would be putting tradition in place of the word of God, and we would be judged based on the word of God and not on tradition. And tradition is not going to save us.
I would agree.
I agree. Okay.
In verse 28, I think, it's mine, I think, but an oddity. Here Peter is saying that according to the Old Testament law, it's not lawful for Jews to have company with any he said about Cornelius was he gave money to the Jewish nation.
Correct.
And so it seemed like, you know, they took his money, but they didn't mind that, they just didn't want to be seen with it.
Correct. Verse 29 then says, therefore came I unto you without gainsaying or without objection as soon as I was sent for. So it's all coming together. Now the rest are starting about verse 30. Cornelius is just recounting what's going on. So in verse 34, when Peter opened his mouth and said, of a truth, I perceive that God is no respecter of persons. He didn't have that idea 5 days ago. But all of this is taking place, and now he makes that one bold statement that even Brother Joel had talked about there. God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him or respect him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. When we skip on, and again, we go through and how things were done, and when we get down to verse 43, it says, to him give all the prophets witness that through his name, whosoever believeth in him shall receive remission of sins. While Peter spake these words, the Holy Ghost fell on them which heard the words. And they of the circumcision which believed were astonished. Now, what group of people is this? Those of the circumcision which believed were astonished. That's the six that traveled with him. And now they're astonished, as many as came with Peter, because they on that, the Gentiles also was poured out the gift of the Holy Ghost. Now it is abundantly clear to everybody, and there's not only Peter's word, there's 6 witnesses that the Holy Ghost, the gospel, is going to be good for everybody. For they heard them speak with tongues and magnify God. Then answered Peter, can any man forbid water that these should not be baptized, which have received the Holy Ghost as well as we? So he's sort of challenging those 6 that are with him, isn't he? Who's going to forbid these from being baptized? Because everything is falling right into place. They've heard the Holy Spirit, the sign has come on them. And then in verse 48 it says, he commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord, then prayed they him to tarry certain days. I rushed through that last section because we're about 2 more minutes before the class is over, and I wanted to get through 10, so Brother Terry can handle 11 Wednesday night. But is there any questions or comments at all about anything in chapter 10 or even anything before?
I think it shows the great lengths. It shows the great lengths that God would go to prove, that he loves these people. And I mean, even when men reject them or would reject them, God himself goes to great lengths to secure them and to save them.
I think if you step back and just look at things in a timeline, and Brother Golden, I saw your hand, I'll get to you in a second. But if you just step back and look at things in a timeline, when God was crucified on the cross, instituted the New Testament, the New Covenant, it was to start with that little clique, the Jews in Jerusalem. Then as it was going to spread out, God directly intervened and took a thorn in their side out of the way when he converted Paul on the road. Because after Paul was converted, Saul to Paul, there was nobody with his zest that continued to persecute him. So they had a period of peace for about 20, 25 years on that end. Now, again, we step right in where there is a direct hand to go with the first Gentile conversion. So there's going to be help all along the way to get this thing rolling. Brother, go.
I think in all the prior baptisms, the Holy Spirit came after. But here's a case where it came forward. The only one I know where they were filled with the Holy Spirit before baptism. And I think this may have been for the benefit of the Jews to see for sure that the Gentiles should be accepted also.
I absolutely believe that also, and if you pull back just a little bit, what was needed sometimes for the Jews to be converted? Signs, wonders, miracles. Well, isn't this the same thing when we get to the Gentile? Now, not to convince the individual, but to convince the Jew. So I think it all works together that way. Thank y'all. I heard the bell ring. Appreciate all your comments.